14-year-old Marcus Johnson hadn't walked in 3 years. He rolled into Courtroom 4B of the Harris County Courthouse in a wheelchair his grandmother had bought from a thrift store. The left wheel squeaked with every rotation. The bailiff didn't even look at him. The court reporter glanced up, then looked away. But Judge Richard Calloway, 22 years on the bench, known across Houston for his impatience and his leather-bound ego, he looked. And what he saw made him smile. Not a kind smile. The kind of smile a man wears when he believes the universe has just delivered him a joke. "Is this some kind of prank?" Calloway said, leaning forward. "Who sent a child in a wheelchair to argue a property case in my courtroom?" No one answered. The gallery was almost empty, a Tuesday morning in a building that smelled like old wood and bureaucracy. Marcus's grandmother, Dorothy Johnson, 71, sat in the second row, her hands folded tight in her lap, her Sunday hat slightly tilted. Marcus reached into the side pocket of his wheelchair and pulled out a manila folder. His hands were steady. His voice, when he finally spoke, was quiet but clear. "Your Honor, my name is Marcus Johnson. I'm here representing my grandmother, Dorothy Johnson, in the matter of Johnson versus Hargrove Development Group. I'm requesting permission to serve as her legal advocate under Texas Family Code Section 51.10. The judge blinked. Then he laughed. Not a chuckle. A full, open-mouthed laugh that echoed off the marble walls. The bailiff shifted uncomfortably. The court reporter stopped typing. "Son," Calloway said, wiping his eye, "I don't know who put you up to this, but this is a real courtroom, not a school debate, not a TikTok video. We're dealing with a $3.2 million property dispute. You think I'm going to let a boy in a wheelchair with a folder play lawyer in my court?" Marcus didn't flinch. "Your Honor, with respect, I'm not playing." Here's what Judge Calloway didn't know. What nobody in that courtroom knew, and what would take them all apart before the morning was over. 3 years earlier, Marcus Johnson was a normal 11-year-old living with his grandmother in the 3rd Ward, the historically black neighborhood in the southeast corner of Houston. He played basketball at the Emancipation Park courts every afternoon. He ran errands for Mrs. Mitchell next door. He carried his grandmother's groceries up 18 steps without complaining once. Then came August 14th. Marcus was riding his bike down Dowling Street when a construction truck, belonging to Hargrove Development Group, ran a red light at the intersection of Wheeler and Dowling. The driver was texting. Marcus didn't even see it coming. The impact threw him 32 feet. He woke up in Ben Taub Hospital 3 days later. His grandmother was sitting beside the bed, holding his hand with both of hers. Her eyes were red, but her voice was steady. "You're still here, baby. That's all that matters." Marcus couldn't feel his legs. The doctors said spinal cord damage, T10 level, partial paralysis. He would likely never walk again. While Marcus was learning how to transfer himself from bed to wheelchair, Hargrove Development Group was busy with a different kind of project. The company, led by Victor Hargrove, a real estate developer with connections reaching deep into the county government, had been buying up properties across the 3rd Ward for years. Block by block, house by house, pressuring elderly residents to sell at a fraction of market value, then demolishing the homes to build luxury condominiums. Dorothy Johnson's house was one of the last holdouts on Elgin Street. A small, blue 2-bedroom home with a sagging porch and a magnolia tree in the front yard that her late husband had planted in 1978. The house was worth $340,000 on a fair market. Hargrove offered her $47,000. When she refused, strange things started happening. Her property tax bill tripled overnight. Code enforcement showed up 3 times in 2 weeks, citing violations she'd never been cited for in 40 years. Her water was shut off by mistake twice. And then the lawsuit arrived. Hargrove Development Group was claiming eminent domain, arguing that Dorothy's property stood in the way of a critical urban development project that served the public interest. If the court ruled in Hargrove's favor, Dorothy would be forced to sell at whatever price the court determined, which, given the company's influence, would likely be closer to $47,000 than $340,000. Dorothy couldn't afford a lawyer. She called 3 legal aid offices. All had waiting lists stretching 6 months. She called a civil rights organization. They said the case was complicated and they'd need to review it. That's when Marcus decided he would handle it himself. Not out of arrogance, out of necessity. And because, in those 3 years since the accident, while the world had written him off as another disabled black kid in a forgotten neighborhood, Marcus Johnson had done something nobody expected. He had taught himself the law. It started in the hospital. With nothing to do during months of recovery and rehabilitation, Marcus asked his grandmother to bring him books from the Houston Public Library. Not novels, not comics, textbooks. He started with Law for Beginners and within 2 weeks had moved on to Texas Property Law, a comprehensive guide. The librarian at the Flores Neighborhood Library, a woman named Patricia Okafor, noticed the boy in the wheelchair coming in every single day, requesting books that most law students found dense. She started setting volumes aside for him. Texas Civil Practice and Remedies Code, the Houston Land Use Regulations Manual, case law compilations from the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. By the time he was 13, Marcus could cite eminent domain precedent from memory. By 14, he had read every property dispute case filed in Harris County over the previous decade. He'd filled 11 composition notebooks with handwritten case analyses. His grandmother would find him asleep at 2 a.m. with a legal dictionary open on his chest, a highlighter still in his hand. "Baby, you need to rest," she'd say. "They're trying to take our house, Grandma. I'm not going to let them." And now, on a Tuesday morning in October, he was sitting in Courtroom 4B. In a thrift store wheelchair, with a manila folder full of evidence that would either save his grandmother's home or prove that the justice system was exactly what his neighborhood had always feared it was. Judge Calloway leaned back in his chair and looked at the opposing counsel's table. 3 lawyers sat there, all men, all in suits that cost more than Dorothy Johnson's mortgage. The lead attorney was Thomas Whitfield, senior partner at Whitfield, Crane & Associates, one of Houston's most powerful real estate litigation firms. He represented Hargrove Development Group. He'd won 11 eminent domain cases in a row. Whitfield looked at Marcus the way a house cat looks at a piece of lint. "Your Honor," Whitfield stood, buttoning his jacket with practiced ease. "With all due respect, this is a serious legal proceeding involving complex property law and municipal zoning regulations. The respondent has sent a minor, a child, to represent her interests. We respectfully request the court either appoint proper legal counsel or enter a default judgment." Calloway nodded. "I'm inclined to agree, Mr. Whitfield." "Your Honor," Marcus's voice cut through the room, not loud, not aggressive, but absolutely unmistakable. Calloway's eyebrows went up. "Excuse me?" "Under Texas Rule of Civil Procedure 7, any person may represent themselves or be represented by an authorized agent in justice court proceedings. Additionally, under Texas Family Code Section 51.10, a minor may act as an advocate in civil matters involving immediate family when no legal representation is available and the court grants permission. My grandmother has filed a sworn affidavit stating she cannot afford counsel. 3 legal aid organizations have confirmed their inability to take the case within the required timeline, and I am her only living family member over the age of 12. Marcus opened his manila folder and held up 3 stapled documents. "I have the affidavit, the legal aid denial letters, and a written brief outlining our defense. I'm asking the court to grant me standing." The courtroom went quiet. Whitfield's confident expression flickered. Calloway stared at the boy for a long moment. "You memorized the Civil Procedure Code?" the judge asked. "No, sir. I read it. There's a difference. Memorizing is repeating words. Reading is understanding what they mean." A sound came from the gallery. It might have been Dorothy trying not to cry. Calloway rubbed his jaw. "Against my better judgment, and I want to be clear, this is highly unusual. I'll allow the respondent's representative to proceed. But son, the moment you waste this court's time, I'm shutting this down." "Understood, Your Honor." Whitfield sat down and whispered something to his colleagues. One of them actually smiled. They weren't worried. A 14-year-old in a wheelchair against the most expensive real estate lawyers in Houston. This would be over in 20 minutes. It wasn't. Whitfield opened with the standard eminent domain playbook. He presented Hargrove's development plan, a $58 million mixed-use project that would bring jobs, housing, and economic revitalization to the Third Ward. He showed architectural renderings, economic impact projections, letters of support from 2 city council members. "This project represents progress, Your Honor," Whitfield said. "Ms. Johnson's property sits at the geographic center of the proposed development. Without it, the entire project is compromised. The public benefit is overwhelming." Calloway nodded along like a man watching a well-rehearsed play. Then it was Marcus's turn. The boy wheeled himself to the center of the courtroom. He didn't have a podium. He spoke from his chair, his folder balanced on his lap. "Your Honor, the petitioner claims this project serves the public interest. I'd like to examine that claim." He pulled out a single sheet of paper. "This is the public record of Hargrove Development Group's previous project, the Midtown Crossing development, completed in 2021. The project displaced 47 families. Mr. Whitfield's firm represented Hargrove in that case as well. The promised public benefits included affordable housing units and community green space." Marcus looked up. The affordable housing units were never built. The community green space became a private parking garage. I have the City Planning Commission's own audit confirming this. Report number CPO-2023-0147. He placed the document on the edge of the judge's bench. Whitfield stood up. "Objection, Your Honor. The Midtown Crossing project is not relevant to—" "It's directly relevant," Marcus said. "Texas Property Code Section 21.0421 requires the condemning authority to demonstrate a genuine public use. Prior failure to deliver on identical promises in a previous project goes directly to the credibility of the current claim. C. Patel versus Texas Department of Transportation, 2019. Calloway blinked. He looked at Whitfield. Whitfield said nothing. "Overruled," the judge said quietly. "Continue." Marcus continued. For the next 45 minutes, the 14-year-old in the squeaky wheelchair dismantled the $58 million development project piece by piece. He showed that Hargrove had purchased 17 other properties on Elgin Street at an average of 14 cents on the dollar, preying on elderly residents who didn't understand their rights. He had the purchase receipts, public records, notarized. He showed that the code enforcement complaints against Dorothy's house were filed by a shell company, Elgin Holdings LLC, whose registered agent was Victor Hargrove's brother-in-law. He had the Secretary of State filings. He showed that the 2 city council members who wrote letters supporting the project had each received campaign donations from Hargrove Development Group within 60 days of signing those letters. He had the campaign finance disclosures. He showed that the property tax reassessment that tripled Dorothy's bill was based on a comparable sales analysis that used luxury condo prices from a neighborhood 4 miles away, not actual Third Ward property values. He had the county assessor's own methodology guidelines, which the assessment violated in 3 specific ways. Every time Whitfield objected, Marcus had a case citation ready. Not just the name, the year, the court, the specific holding, and how it applied to the current facts. By the 7th objection, Whitfield had stopped standing up. The courtroom was no longer empty. Word had spread. A bailiff had texted his cousin. A court clerk had told her supervisor. By the time Marcus was presenting his final exhibit, there were 38 people in the gallery. 2 of them were reporters. And Dorothy Johnson was crying. Silently, her hands still folded in her lap, her Sunday hat still perfectly straight. But her cheeks were wet and she was mouthing something over and over. "That's my baby. That's my baby." Judge Calloway sat motionless for a long time after Marcus finished his presentation. The courtroom was so quiet you could hear the air conditioning. Then the judge did something that shocked everyone. He took off his reading glasses, set them on the bench, and spoke directly to Marcus. "Young man, how old are you again?" 14, Your Honor." "And you prepared all of this yourself? No lawyer helped you?" "No, sir. I used the Houston Public Library, the Harris County Clerk's online records, and the Texas State Law Library's digital archive, all publicly available." Calloway turned to Whitfield. "Mr. Whitfield, you brought a team of 3 attorneys from one of the most expensive firms in the state. You had months to prepare. You had unlimited resources. And a 14-year-old boy in a wheelchair just exposed fabricated code violations, shell company intimidation, campaign finance improprieties, and a fraudulent tax reassessment, all using public records that your client apparently assumed nobody would ever bother to read." Whitfield opened his mouth. Nothing came out. "I have a few questions for the petitioner," Calloway continued. He turned toward the gallery, where Victor Hargrove sat in the back row. Hargrove was a large man in a blue suit. He walked in confidently. He doesn't look confident now. "Mr. Hargrove, would you approach the bench?" Hargrove stood slowly. His attorney moved to intercept. "Mr. Whitfield, sit down," Calloway said. His voice had changed. The amusement was gone. Something harder had taken its place. "I want to hear from your client directly." Hargrove walked to the front of the courtroom like a man walking through water. "Mr. Hargrove, did your company file code enforcement complaints against Ms. Johnson's property through a shell company?" Your Honor, I'd like to consult with my—" "Yes or no, Mr. Hargrove?" Silence. "Did your company's previous development, Midtown Crossing, deliver the affordable housing units it promised to this court in 2019? More silence. "Did you or your representatives make campaign contributions to council members Rivera and Chung within 60 days of requesting their letters of support for this project?" Hargrove's face was the color of ash. "Your Honor," Whitfield tried. This line of questioning is exactly what should have happened the first time your client tried this in my county," Calloway said. He was looking at Marcus now. "And it took a 14-year-old to make it happen." The judge paused. He picked up his glasses, put them on, opened a legal pad, and began writing. When he finished, he read his ruling aloud. "In the matter of Johnson versus Hargrove Development Group, case number 2025-CV-44871, this court finds that the petitioner has failed to demonstrate a genuine public use for the proposed condemnation of the respondent's property at 2847 Elgin Street, Houston, Texas." Dorothy's hand flew to her mouth. "Further, this court finds substantial evidence of predatory acquisition practices, including the use of shell companies to file retaliatory code enforcement complaints, the submission of a fraudulent tax reassessment, and a documented pattern of failing to deliver on public benefit promises in prior developments." Calloway looked up from his pad. "The petition for eminent domain is denied. Ms. Johnson's property is protected. Additionally, this court is referring the evidence presented today to the Harris County District Attorney's Office for investigation into potential fraud, abuse of process, and violations of campaign finance regulations." The gallery erupted. Not applause, the bailiff would have stopped that. Something deeper, a collective exhale, whispers that sounded like prayers. But Calloway wasn't done. He looked at Marcus, the boy in the wheelchair, the boy he'd laughed at 90 minutes ago. "Mr. Johnson." "Yes, Your Honor?" "I owe you an apology." The courtroom went completely silent. "When you wheeled into my courtroom this morning, I assumed I knew who you were and what you were capable of. I was wrong. I looked at your age, your chair, and the color of your skin, and I made a judgment before you ever said a word. That is the opposite of what this bench is supposed to represent. Calloway's voice was thick. The man who had spent 22 years never showing emotion in court was fighting to keep his composure. You did something today that most licensed attorneys couldn't do. You outprepared a team of lawyers with nothing but a library card and a refusal to quit. You protected your grandmother's home. You exposed corruption that has been hurting families in this community for years. And you did it all from that chair, because nobody would do it for you. He paused. I've been on this bench for 22 years. This is the most impressive legal argument I have ever witnessed. Marcus didn't smile. He didn't celebrate. He turned his wheelchair around and rolled back to where his grandmother was sitting. Dorothy stood up. She reached down and wrapped her arms around her grandson. She held him so tight the wheelchair creaked. Her hat fell off. She didn't care. You saved our house, baby, she whispered. You saved our house. Marcus closed his eyes. For the first time all morning, his hands were shaking. No, Grandma, he said. I saved our home. The two reporters in the gallery published their stories that afternoon. By evening, Marcus Johnson's name was trending. Not because he was a victim, not because he was an inspiration, because he was proof. Proof that the systems designed to keep people down can be beaten with the same rules they hide behind. Proof that a library card is more dangerous than a law degree, if you're willing to do the work. Proof that a 14-year-old black boy in a second-hand wheelchair from a neighborhood the city had already decided to erase could walk into the most hostile room in the building and walk out. No, roll out. He rolled out. He rolled out with his grandmother's home still standing, and a billion-dollar developer facing a criminal investigation. 3 weeks later, the Harris County District Attorney filed charges against Victor Hargrove for fraud and abuse of process. The investigation eventually expanded to include 2 city council members. The Flores Neighborhood Library, where Marcus had spent 3 years teaching himself the law, received a $200,000 anonymous donation the following month. Patricia Okafor, the librarian who had set aside books for the boy in the wheelchair, found out about the donation from a news article. She sat at her desk and cried for 10 minutes. Then she ordered 47 new legal reference books. Marcus was offered full scholarships to 3 law schools, contingent on his completing high school and undergraduate studies. He accepted none of them at the time. He said he'd think about it. When a reporter asked him what he wanted to be when he grew up, he said something that became the most shared quote of the year. I don't want to be a lawyer. I want to be the reason nobody in my neighborhood ever needs one. Dorothy Johnson still lives at 2847 Elgin Street. The magnolia tree her husband planted in 1978 is still in the front yard. The porch still sags a little. The house is still blue. And if you drive through the 3rd Ward on a Tuesday evening, you might see the light on in the front room. That's Marcus, still reading, still learning, still refusing to quit. Because some people see a boy in a wheelchair and see a limitation. Marcus Johnson sees a seat he doesn't have to stand up from to bring the whole room to its feet. If this story moved you, don't scroll past. Like this video. Subscribe to this channel and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Tell us in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? And what did Marcus's story teach you? Because somewhere out there, there's another kid being told they're not enough, and they need to know the truth. You don't need permission to be extraordinary. You just need a library card and a reason.